This chapter introduces what law is, the types of law, as well as sources of law. So, what do you think of when you hear the word law? For most people, they think of rules of conduct for behavior that have been written down, and this, while in practice is true, is known as substantive law. However, law is also the structures and the procedures and the people who have the authority to put law into practice. Now, law can be an avenue for redress of social ills in society. Think some people have argued for the right for two people of the same gender to be able to marry. So some states have made that legal. And then others might believe that the law is used only as a means to maintain the status quo and the power of those in the ruling class. For example, currently felons cannot vote in a general election unless their rights have been restored. Some people would argue that that is being oppressive. So as you see it, the law can be liberating, as I gave in the first example, or it can be oppressive to others. So the criminal justice system is made up of the police, who apprehend offenders and charge them with crimes. It's made up of the courts, who ascertain guilt, and then finally corrections, who carry out the punishment. So our court system is an adversarial system. And what that means is the prosecution, or sometimes I refer to it as the state, is against the defense in a search for the truth. And the burden of proof is always on the prosecution to prove. It's not up to a defense to prove themselves innocent, like we would assume. It's up to the prosecution to prove that person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So what is law? Law is a body of rules of specific conduct prescribed by an existing legitimate authority in a particular jurisdiction and at a particular point in time. But have you ever stopped to wonder where laws come from? So we get our laws from the Constitution. Both the United States Constitution as well as each state has their own constitution. We also get our laws from our statutes, and those are our written laws that are passed by our legislation. In North Carolina, we refer to them as the North Carolina General Statutes, or NCGS. We also get laws from court decisions. These are known as case law or precedents. And then we also have administrative rules and regulations. And think of things like environmental regulations from the EPA or FFA regulations regarding flying. So then the types of law. So there's substantive law, procedural law, common law, civil law, criminal law, and administrative law. And we will look at each of these individually. So first, you've got substantive law. And as I explained a moment ago, this is the law on the books. So think again of our North Carolina General Statutes. These laws exist that define the actions that would make someone guilty of breaking a law. Then you've got procedural law, and this is a mandate of how the law will be applied. For example, procedural law specifies how police officers must obtain and execute a search warrant. It also determines how evidence should be submitted to court and even the process that juries must return their verdict. Next, you've got common law, and this originated in England, and it refers to the traditions and customs that were passed down, and eventually those were turned into laws. Then you've got civil law. The civil law originated in ancient Roman law, and it resolves disputes between private parties, such as arguments over land boundaries. Think of two neighbors are arguing over where a fence divides their land, and one neighbor says that the fence is on their land and it should be on the other person's land. And also child support. Most of the time, the penalties sought are typically monetary. It would not result in any incarceration time. To contrast civil law, we have criminal law. And the majority of what we focus on in criminal justice is the study of criminal law. And criminal law involves violations against society where the state, again, that's the prosecution, brings charges against offenders. Punishments are usually, or can be severe. They're more severe than what you would see in civil law. And people can be convicted. If people are convicted, they can be fined, given probation, or even incarcerated. And lastly, you've got administrative law. And this is the body of law, rules and orders and regulations created by administrative agencies. They affect us in our daily lives. For one example is the FDA must approve medication prior to you taking it. So a drug making company such as Pfizer can't come out with a new medicine saying that it'll alleviate the symptoms of Alzheimer's without it going through FDA trials, clinical trials first to prove that it is safe and that it can do what it claims to do. So in summary, you have discussed the types of law, the sources of law, and what is law.